Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are in the world. And thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar, which is around driving employee recruitment and retention in 2024, with particular focus on the employee value proposition. So it's great to see that so many of you are looking to focus on your EVP as a route to tackling your recruitment and retention challenges next year. And it very much is reflective of our recent state of employee engagement report that we put out, where 89% of people were saying that the retention conundrum was either getting more difficult or not changing at all for them. So we've got a huge amount to pack into the session today. Just before I quickly hand over to Ian, just wanted to say, if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask throughout the session, please do add them to either the Q&A or the chat function within this webinar. We may not get round to them all at the end. We are acknowledging that now. But if you do have any questions, please add them, and we promise to take them offline and send you all the responses with the resources that we'll send out after the session. So without further ado, I shall hand over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Hayley. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this session. My name's Ian Barrow. I'm the Client Services Director here at WorkBuzz. And I've been working in the field of employee engagement, culture, employee listening for probably, well, just coming up to 29 years this year, so a long time. I wanted to share with you today really my thoughts about why we need to refocus really on EVP. A lot of the surveys and what I'm hearing from clients and CEOs at the moment is talking about retention, it's talking about recruitment, it's talking about the need to attract people from a pool of talent that's out there or not there, as the case may be. And I thought it's a good time to just think about our EVP. So if you've not got one, there'll be lessons in here about how to build one. But secondly, if you have got one, it's certainly a key time at the moment to refresh that EVP, to refresh the messaging, refresh what's in there. So you're making sure you're attractive as possible for potential recruits to your organisation. As Hayley said, there's quite a lot to get through today, so we'll push on quite quickly. What's your why? I like Simon Sinek. I like some of the stuff that he comes out with, but I think this is a really key question when we're thinking about EVP. We're thinking about the reasons of why we recruit. We're thinking about the key factors in recruitment. And it's really the key question of today. What's your why? Why do you exist? Why do you exist as an organization? Why do you exist in the world? And what does that mean for people? Answering your why will help you understand how you attract people to your organization, the right people to your organization. So understanding that is really critical. And if you have a look at the TED Talks that Simon does around this, you'll pick up loads of pointers about creating messaging, really key narratives around your organisation, which can go out into the world and attract key candidates for you. So today's session, what we'll look at our employees at the moment and what they're seeing, and what they feel and what they do and how that's changed post-pandemic over the last 4 years. Apologies. We'll look at the impact of hybrid and flexible working and what impact that's had on people's values. What are employees actually looking for in an employer nowadays? What are they seeking out? What does that mean for you as an organisation, and what does that mean for your brand? How we navigate towards more human organisations. That's really important, as people's views are on organisations in terms of having values which match my own, and the move towards more human organisations and a more human way of managing people. That's really important as well. And critically then, what does that mean for your EVP? How do you build an EVP, or how do you tweak your EVP so it's more appealing to the workforce today and the workforce of the future? Let's just have a bit of a recap on where we've been. I'm going to look back over the last 4 years really, in terms of post-pandemic years, if you like. In saying that, the workplace has been changing for some time. So what happened was that there was a number of changes going on, disruption of traditional sectors, things that you can see an image there of Deliveroo, in terms of food delivery or home delivery or whatever that might be in terms of retail. We were seeing new flexible ways of working, even pre-pandemic. we were seeing employees looking for values that align with organisations. So much more personal to me, working here isn't just a job. It's much more about how I feel about the organisation and how connected I am to the organisation. So it's all about purpose and participation. I'm reimagining the workplace. What did the workplace look like? What actually happened with the pandemic? It wasn't the fact that these were new thoughts, new ways of working post-pandemic. It's just the fact that the pandemic accelerated these changes. And for many organisations who weren't ready for those changes, it pushed you to a point where you had to change. So the changes that we've been seeing in the marketplace have been happening for many, many years, but it's been accelerated by pandemic, and it's difficult now to roll back some of these changes, but we'll touch on that in a second. And I think, and there was a nice report by a company called Corporate Culture Group, and they produced a report called The Human Organization. And one of the things they looked at was post-pandemic, what actually changed, what has been the impact on all of our lives in 3 different strands. So in resilience, in relationships and human interactions, and in terms of recovery from that period. So we saw lots of things around resilience, in terms of trust in the government, and we're seeing that at the moment with the inquiry into the COVID period, and that's declined the trust in government, down to personalities, but also down to the way the UK government in particular, I'm talking about, handle the pandemic. The value of key workers in terms of the NHS workers and frontline workers who went through that period. And then if we're looking at relationships, our relationship with public transport changed. The train companies, for example, are still not running at the levels they were pre-pandemic because lots of people are working from home. Zoom calls like this and Teams calls have taken over meetings where you might have gotten a train in the past. And we've seen the relationship with the car, for example, changing as we move away from fossil fuels into electric vehicles. And then finally, recovery, the impact on public transport, partnership, collaboration. There's a number of things changing there. But what we're going to concentrate on today is this one, the change in perception of what we value in terms of our workplace and in terms of how we want to work going forward. Because that impacts then on the experience we have in the workplace and ultimately then impacts on in terms of EVP. Just to sort of demonstrate that that's not just theory, that's not just what we're talking about. We saw huge changes. So even before the pandemic, we saw the impact of Brexit, and that's 6 years ago now, and workers returning to the home countries. We saw the impact of COVID, and again, workers return to the home countries from the UK. So we saw where the impact is on some big sectors that are seeing real problems with recruitment and retention. So hospitality staff in hotels and in restaurants didn't return to the industry post-pandemic. So there was a newspaper article there around chef shortages, for example. And certainly some of the clients we have, big hotel groups, are really struggling to recruit in some key positions. The care sector, people just didn't go back to the care sector. They were frontline, stress was huge when the pandemic period, and they didn't return to that sector. HGV driver shortages, again, for some of the bigger haulage companies and the major supermarkets. Airline and airport shortages, we're still seeing that now. So particularly in baggage handlers and people like that, they just didn't return to that industry after it was shut down for so long. But we've also got these things like changes in lifestyle. People really want to retain that hybrid working lifestyle. They've got different perspectives on what's important in terms of work life and home life. The work from anywhere culture, which is potentially changing, and again, I'll touch on that in a second. Wage increases, although that's slowing due to cost of living, and the wider introduction of AI as well. That's probably going to be on lots of people's minds, both organisationally from a corporate point of view, and as individuals as we move through the next 10 years, 20 years maybe. Because if you believe people like Elon Musk, we're going to see lots of organisations implementing AI, which will mean less headcount, less people working. And it's the real kind of thing that we're seeing in a lot of surveys and in the press at the minute is that where we work is top of mind. So we've gone through that period where we had hybrid working and it appeared to have settled. But we've certainly seen for lots of organisations, particularly in white-collar environments, a real U-turn at the moment in terms of working from home or working from anywhere or working near home. and we're seeing people U-turn on that. So we're seeing organisations now saying people have got to be in the office 2 days, maybe 3 days a week. How will that move going forward? Maybe 4 days a week. I can't see us returning to a full 5-day working pattern in an office for the majority of people, but certainly we're seeing organisations move in that direction at the moment, and that's unsettling for some people who've got used to that hybrid working situation and that kind of cadence and pattern of work. It's important to lots of people as well. And if it's cause, you know, if somebody says, look, I want to carry on working hybrid, and the organisation says, no, we're all back in the office, and they say, well, okay, I'll leave, I'll use my vote and walk from the organisation. It's going to be tough if lots of other organisations are also taking that standpoint. So there'll be a change in the way hybrid working is implemented in organisations, and we're certainly seeing that ball start to roll. Certainly for lots of organisations. And what it created was actually a war for talent. So, and we're going to see that heighten again as wage increases stall and growth stalls. But we're still seeing, whichever survey you look at. So Microsoft did a survey, and a global survey that was, and they found that 41% of workers were quitting or considering changing professions. Similarly, Personio did a survey of technology workers, and they found a similar number, around about 38%. And then if you look at multiple studies around who's going to change jobs over the next year, in the UK, it's running around about a fifth, something like that. 1 in 5 workers are saying they're going to change jobs. So that kind of merry-go-round and that war for talent is still there, and it's still really critical, which makes your EVP even more critical. And right at the top corner, the UK pay growth slows. That was taken from the BBC website today. You can see listed there 2 hours ago, and it's still showing around about 949,000 jobs still available in the UK. So just under 1 million vacancies are still available in the UK, even though that's decreased from about 1.5 million about 6 to 8 months ago. It's still an awful lot of vacancies out there. So the war for talent is still there. Recruitment and retention is still top of the priority list. But we've also seen changes in the way generations think about work. So, you know, if you're looking at just last year, that was the makeup of the workforce. So, you know, no Gen Alphas at the minute because they were only born around 2012. The traditionalists are dying out, you know, apart from US presidents, and even Rupert Murdoch retired about 2 months ago. So the traditionalists are moving out of the workforce. And you can see the makeup in kind of 10 years' time and what that looks like. But the real key thing is the average length of service, and that's taken from Yahoo Finance data. So the younger workforce, and remember, you can see there that Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z and Gen Alpha are going to be the real kind of makeup of the working population in 10 years' time. And the length of service of those different categories on average is only around about 3 years, something like that. 2 years, 9 months, 2 years, 3 months. So in that period, you're looking to recruit somebody in, develop them, train them, get them competent in what they're doing within the role, and push them on to greater things. But the likelihood is, on average, you know, lots of those people are going to move on the 3-year mark. So there's lots of things to think about in terms of EVP and what does that mean. And particularly if we're looking at longer term retention, what's going to keep a millennial? What's going to keep a Gen Z? Gen Alpha, we don't know anything about those yet, although we do know some of the characteristics already. So if you think of children, if you've got children of that age in the kind of, you know, 3-year to 10-year-old age group, if you like, the big thing about those individuals and those children is that they're brought up with screens, you know, whether it be a phone screen, whether it be an iPad screen, whether it be something they entertain themselves with, whether it be something they pacify with. You know, we've all been on planes or trains where you see a young child and they're sat there watching cartoons or something like that, and it's a pacifier. But the critical thing is they're brought up to be educated that way as well in school. So somebody termed them screen ages, which I think is a brilliant term. I wish I thought about it. But if you think of what Gen Alpha will look for into the future, we know that they're going to probably learn by looking at screens. We know that they're probably going to want to develop by looking at screens. We know that they're probably going to want to have a career and work with looking at screens. So That is really important. So when Gen Alpha actually come into the workplace, the training and development they'll look for, and the best way to train and develop them will be through online programs. It won't be, old-fashioned, as it were, one-to-one training with an individual. It's more than likely they'll learn from looking at an online program or an online training exercise. So we know that the change is going to come through the organisation, through these generations. And that's really important, again, for your EVP, what people will be looking for. So why revisit it now? I think there's a number of things. Recruitment and retention is important, and you have to differentiate as an organisation. So knowing what makes you stand out from the crowd as an organisation is really key. And the reasons are, as we've already seen, society's changed. People have different sets of values and ethics. So you have to make sure that you're differentiating yourself in that way. Employees and customers, to be honest, are buying and differentiating on brand value and personality, driven by a lot of what they see on social media. So that's important, again, that you're corporately aligned and you're differentiated as corporately from your competition. Reputation and opinion has a huge impact as well on operational freedom. So, if you're a brand like Apple and you advertise a job vacancy, you can almost guarantee that you're going to get the real kind of premier people that's sending in their CVs to apply for the role. So that kind of reputation opinion has a huge impact on the ability to attract top talent. Brand equity as well, that's really important. The impact of social media now defines what the brand looks like. So that brand equity in terms of what people see and what they believe about the organization is really critical. And finally, if you can retain or attract key talent, that's also a motivator within the workplace and the workforce and the potential workforce as well. If people see top talent staying with organizations, they're much more likely to stay themselves or be attracted to that organization. So it's really important that we differentiate in a number of different ways. Excuse me. And also, from a point of view of addressing key corporate challenges, there's a real shortage of skilled labour globally. So, attractive employers, quite simply, will get the best people. The shortage of skilled employees in key sectors, we've talked about that as well. And having a good, strong EVP addresses that factor. More with less. There's a huge pressure on all of us at the minute to cut costs, increase productivity, and getting and recruiting the right people is really important, because skilled employees and experienced employees get things done quicker and more efficiently. Growth and profitability is really key, as well as its popularity. I mentioned great reputation to attract people, and the strength, the bargaining power of the company makes the brand really important, in the sense that it attracts people, but it also makes people want to stay rather than going elsewhere. This is an American study on the right-hand side, but if you actually look at that, and the study asks, they run it every year, and the study asks 13 to 39-year-olds in the US where they actually want to work or where they'd like to work. And if you look at that list, it's kind of the usual suspects, as it were, YouTube and Google and PayPal and Amazon and Apple. But that's just because of the strength of the brand. Strength of these brands is everlasting, and it keeps people there, but it also attracts people just because it's so powerful. So the outcomes, what's the outcomes of an attractive EVP? It's central in creating value for the business. You can effectively compete for talent against competitors. It drives the strategic and creative thinking. It's the nucleus of your messaging, or should be. It reduces time and money on recruitment because you're getting speculative candidates all the time. It informs your HR policies and procedures, because it should. Your EVP isn't just about an outward-facing message; it's also about inward as well, and it helps your business stay honest. Your EVP should be a reflection of actually what happens in real life. Okay, some people stretch their EVP messaging to attract people, but there's no point in kind of stretching it too far, because you could recruit people into your organization, and when they get there, they just sit there and say, hey, this isn't what was promised, if you like. It doesn't match the EVP that I saw from the outside, and they quickly leave again. And the real key thing is social media. Just be aware of social media, on how your brand, your image, your corporate image is projected by social media. We live in the age of, YouTube age is probably past now. It's more about the TikTok age, but your brand is really important for that kind of group of people, and will be more so when Gen Alpha comes into the marketplace. So what does an EVP look like now, and what the current drivers? I just want to take a bit of a step back and just think about what's changing. You know, we've gone through a period, many years, probably 15 years now, where we've measured employee engagement. So we've looked at employee engagement as a key measure for many of our businesses. And that's still the case. Employee engagement is still a fantastic measure. But what we're seeing from many organizations now is the widening that measure out. So it's much more now, rather than just looking at employee engagement, it's looking at the whole experience. And the whole employee experience that they see and what they feel and how they see behaviors around them really is spread over the whole lifetime they have with the organization. So it's much more focused now on the employee as opposed to the employer. That's kind of spun on its head. It's become a limiting factor for some engagements as we move towards a measurement of employee experience. And it's a deeper understanding of the motivations of why people work where they do. You know, it's not just a need to work anymore. As I said, people want the organizational values to reflect their own. They want a place where they grow as an individual, where they get something out of it as an individual, and they're not just a cog in the engine kind of thing. So it's much more important that we understand people at a deeper level of why they work where they do. And that experience goes from, you know, the day you're attracted to an organization or a role. So it's even before recruitment. You go through the recruitment phase and onboarding, which has to be perfect. And then you go through that phase of your career with an organization where you connect and you develop and you perform, and hopefully you get rewarded for that in terms of progression and career development. There's life events as well. You know, you may go on maternity leave within an organization, and how are you treated then? And how does the organization bring you back once you've gone through that period? Or you may be long-term sick, or you may go through a corporate life event where you're managing people where you've never managed people in the past. And eventually, hopefully, you exit in a positive way from the organisation, and you become an alumni, and you would recommend it to family and friends or whoever or peer groups to work there. And that's really important in terms of, again, EVP, that life cycle, that experience that people have with the organisation should really form the basis of what your EVP is and what that looks like and what that feels like. Because again, it has to, whatever you project outwardly from the organisation has to reflect what happens internally to people. So when you look at it, really, the employee experience, the impact on EVP is, it's the employment deal in effect. It's what's derived from the employee experience. It's the everyday experiences, the rewards, the growth, the reputation as a place to work. It's really important to drive that and understand that in the context of the EVP. So in terms of the organizational perspective, it's about the EVP should attract and retain people and engage and motivate and do all those really good things we want. It should be consistent, as I've said a couple of times, but it should really be the essence of why people come to work for an organization. You know, if you ask any of your employees, you know, why do you work here? You'll be able to hear the reasons. You'll be able to hear the EVP in action, and that's really important. From the other side of the fence, the employee perspective, it's much more about driving them as individuals. It determines the discretionary effort, if you like, beyond the job role. It brings mission, values, other KPIs to life for people, and it's an authentic promise that the organisation makes. So it has to be a personal promise to your people, your existing people in the organisation, and your recruits. This is what it feels like here. This is what it looks like here. This is why it's fantastic to work here. And you bring people in on that basis. It breaks down into 5 constituent parts. So if you think about the EVP, it's about people. That's around teamwork and camaraderie and management quality. It's about work life. And that includes where you're actually working, location, hybrid working. It's about organizational culture, around values and around leadership. It's about opportunity, so career development, and it's about rewards. And these are the touch points you really need to hit with your EVP proposition. These are the points that you need to hit and the things that you need to get understand. And once we get that, you know, we get commitments internally. It improves employee satisfaction, motivation, engagement. It's the improvement of and you get employee retention improvements, but you also get higher levels of attraction, you know, in terms of the available talent pool increases because many more people want to work for a great company. It increases the fit as well because you're telling people who you are, what you do, your values, and you're only going to get the right people who apply for the jobs with you rather than people who are there just for the role or just for the salaries, as it were. I've also had a go breaking that down, and to give you a bit of a help in breaking those down, I've come up with 38 attributes here of potential attributes which are most important for attraction and retention. But you know, for those of you on the call, you may have others that you want to add into this based on your sector or who you are as an organisation. But broadly, when you're thinking about EVP and you're thinking about the kind of things that people either consciously or subconsciously think about when you apply for a role or you work for an organisation, it's a lot of this kind of stuff here. So, you know, camaraderie and manager quality and senior leadership reputation, and the organisation then breaks down into a number of different things. So again, it's a starter for 10, I guess, these 38 attributes. You may disagree with some of them, you may agree with all of them and have more to add. But we provide you with this to start your thinking around what should we think about when we're building an EVP and what the attributes that potential candidates are looking at. So what's the process? We've talked a bit about going back in time a bit. We've talked a bit about why they're important. We've talked about what an EVP, the components of an EVP. So what's the process of either creating one from scratch, which some of you may well be doing, or it's about tweaking your own EVP? What do we need to do? Well, first of all, we need to think about key questions. We need to think about what we want to answer. So, and you know, I've given you a flavour of what those questions might be. So, why do people want to join our organisation? And what do we offer employees beyond money and beyond reward and benefits, in terms of maybe career developments or in terms of personal developments, in terms of skills development? What do we offer people? Does the EVP match the corporate brand? And we'll touch on that in a second, in a short while. What values does your culture support? And you may have values. You know, I go into lots of organisations where I see the values of the organisation, but when you do surveys, employee surveys or other surveys, you can clearly see that the behaviours that happen day to day in the organisation don't actually match the values that are on the wall, or don't actually get to the heart of the behavioural values as well. So what values does your culture support, and are you supporting stated values that you have as an organisation? And the different patterns by demographics and age, as I said, that's going to be key going forward for all of us. And does the organisation, do we enable employees to make them truly effective? You know, do we give them a challenging role or roles that will make a difference and make them think about that? So there's a number of key questions that we need to answer when we're starting to think about building or tweaking our EVP. And there's just 5 essential parts. So the positioning, what's the real EVP? What does it feel like now to work here? What's the experience that colleagues are going through? What does that look like? You know, what does that feel like? And also your desired EVP. Where do you want to get to as an organisation? So you measure your culture now. What does that feel like? What's the experience? But we may have a different view of what we want that to be in 1 year's time or 5 years' time or 10 years' time. So we need to think about that journey and that positioning. The employee viewpoint, we need to understand how people feel at present. We also need a view of the external viewpoint. So how do people see us? You know, that might be different than we view ourselves. So that's important as well. Critical drivers, understanding what they are, and then a set of messaging, if you like, based on what we found from the other four essential parts. As I said, it's got to be based in facts, but obviously we want to be creative. We need to attract people, so it's somewhat aspirational as well, but we can't stray too far away from what we see and what we feel as an organisation. So we assess where we currently are and what the position is. Assess what we are and clearly as well what we're not. We should be clear about our branding, and it's important that we become completely objective when we're carrying this out. You know, it's no point in saying, "Oh, we've got great camaraderie here and everybody works together." when your employee survey is saying that, you know, there's really poor collaboration across teams. So be clear about when you do the assessments of how of these different 38 attributes or however many you come to, be clear and honest about where you're at, because that's really important. You can't kind of spin it too far when you're building an EVP that's looking external. And one of the key things, obviously, and one of the things that we do at WorkBuzz is we run employee surveys, we run culture surveys, we run a number of different surveys for organisations. So understanding why your employees work for you and what satisfaction and pleasure do they gain from work, important things for them, their current experiences, attraction, how do they manifest themselves in everyday experience. Really important that you gather that, and obviously the easiest way is through a survey process that you may or may not have in place, but that's a really key part of what we're trying to do here. Get that line in the sand, that baseline of who we are and what we do. And then research other people. This is the external viewpoint. You know, good ways to look at your exit data, your exit interviews, if you do them. You know, why did people leave our organisation? That gives us a clear picture of you know, the bad bits, if you like. It tells us what people don't like about the organisation and how we could have done to help them. Use sites like Glassdoor. You know, employees, past employees, present employees go on Glassdoor, and they'll give you key pointers about where you need to act and how to build your EVP in the right way, because it will tell you what your positives are and obviously what your failings are as well. If you use recruitment agencies or any other agencies for that matter, or even customers, speak to them about how they view your organisation, so you're getting a truly objective view of the organisation. In terms of recruitment, in terms of what they see, in terms of how they see, in terms of how attractive they see your organisation is for potential candidates. You know, and sometimes they're brutally honest. When I've done this exercise before, sometimes it's quite painful to hear, but it's a really good way of getting a really truthful answer about how people from outside the organisation see it. And then segregate your data. Look at what motivates your top performers and what motivates other potential employees within the organisation. And then your outbound offers can be differentiated by these different people. So the next steps, once we've done that kind of research and understood more about who we are and what we are, write an EVP statement. You know, organisations, this is how you're going to start getting your message out there. So once you've identified what differentiates you, once you've identified what it feels like now, once you've identified the journey you want to go on, write an EVP statement so it's a clear, unique way of selling yourself. That's the only way you'll attract top talent. So organisations that do this, you know, you've got to make sure that it's aligned with your employees, it's aligned with the company's expectations, it's aligned with the journey you want to go on as well. So that EVP statement is like a purpose statement, if you like it. It really defines where you want to go. And to give you a couple of examples of what an EVP statement looked at, there's a couple on here where it names them. So Goldman Sachs are bottom left, and PwC are in the middle top there. But I'll give you 2 minutes. I'll take a quick slurp of water. I'll give you 30 seconds to look at these. See if you can guess what the others are and who the others are, and I'll show you the brands in a second. So if you've had a chance to look at those, they're the EVP statements for these organisations. So some of them are really aspirational. You know, Nando's, for example, heart and soul, passion, personality. You know, Google, do cool things that matter. And then you get more kind of based in the job role, if you like, with Unilever. You're more than just your job title. So these statements are designed to be eye-catching. They're designed to reel people in and pull people in terms of the organisation. They're also designed to really, in a short sentence or two, to describe what the organisation might feel like. You know, at Goldman Sachs, you will make impact. So it's really hitting you between the eyes and telling you, giving you a flavour already of what the job role might do and where you're going to get to with it. So the EVP statement should be your starting point once you understand where you are as an organisation. And then define these key components of your EVP, the critical drivers. So use the research that you've got, use that to answer the key questions that I showed earlier, but also then start to think about What salary range of benefits are going to attract people? What career growth opportunities do we need to put in front of people? What culture is going to help me? How do I describe the culture here? And those values that I talked about earlier that younger age groups are looking for. What constitutes the ideal work environment? And again, that's where this hybrid working, if you like, comes into be a key factor. You know, if you've got somebody who's looking for that, but you're an organization that's moving away from that, you've got real challenges there. And how do you ensure you maintain that as an offer? And what's going to differentiate us? What's going to make us really stand out from either people in the sector or people around the geographic location where we are, or even the wider global competition? What's going to make us different? And it could be that you segment it for different roles as well. So recent graduates filling an entry-level position, you know, that the EVP that you're offering to those individuals and the messaging you're giving might be around career growth and a great office environment and a positive experience and values and employee perks and hybrid working. Whereas for somebody who's a more experienced professional, it might be things around career stability, childcare if they've still got children of that age, and you know, if they're older than that, and a bit like me, children have left home, it's really about work-life balance then, and what does that mean in terms of that? So determine what your offer looks like, translate it into statements, and translate it into statements that different potential candidates can understand and actually see, if you like, see and feel. So it's about looking at the extrinsic. It's about looking at rewards, the organisation, the brand reputation, the location where you're going to work, and the intrinsic, and creating an EVP, if you like, that takes into account either all of those or elements of those. So it might be rewarding organisation and culture and lifestyle for a particular group that you're going to home in on, and create the EVP around those different factors. And then promote it through the right channels. So it's not just about a careers page on your website where you stick all this stuff. You really need to promote it. So it's about internal promotion in terms of your employees, whether it be the intranet, whether it be posters, whether it be stuff on the wall, whether it be stuff online, whatever it might be. It's gonna be a number of things where you drive the messages about how fantastic it is to work here, and what these key things are that you understand, and what the experience looks like, and why it's a brilliant experience, and why they're going to get career development if they need it, and all those really good things. But it's also about thinking about that external world and where you want to position the messaging there as well. So it might be LinkedIn pages, it might be website careers pages, job postings, recruitment videos, wherever it might be. And if it's a particular sector you're in, what websites, you know, apply to that particular sector, or recruitment points for that particular sector. So important to drive it through those different channels in different points. And if it's all about recruitment and it's not about anything else, how do we ensure that we're visible to the right talent? So, you know, where do people who you want to recruit, where do they congregate? You know, in virtually, as it were, on the internet, where are the websites that they look at, and how can you drive your messaging through that? Making sure your message stands out as well. That's really key. Clarity and consistency of message as well. And tailor it for different audiences. We spoke about that. What are people looking for at different age groups? What are people driving towards? What do they want from the EVP? And don't just become a destination employer, and you know, stand out from the crowd. What can we do differently that's going to attract people to us, or keep people for that matter? And how do we keep it real? We've talked, I've mentioned that a few times now. Ensure that the experience we promise candidates matches the one we deliver to employees. As I said, you don't want to recruit somebody who gets into the organisation, just sees it's a complete fabrication, if you like, of the reality, and within 2 or 3 months they've left the organisation again. Waste of time for you and a waste of time for them. And the other thing I would suggest is that you need to check metrics to make sure your EVP is working. So higher engagements on social media, on job-related posts. So if you post it on LinkedIn, a job, you know, how many people are looking at it and applying for it. And increasing applications. So as your EVP is stronger and out there, and it's reaching more people, you should see increases in applications, for example, for jobs. You'll see an increase in passive candidates applying for roles. see falling attrition, and you'll see sites like Glassdoor where you get much more positive reviews. And keep reviewing your EVP. You know, it's not something that you do and then it's static for 5 years. Once a year is probably enough, but as the economy changes, as sectors change, as work life changes, you know, it's well worth reviewing it annually if possible, and working through it just to make sure that you're doing the right thing and all your metrics are tracking over time. And again, just to give you some more metrics, just examples. Awareness, it might be followers, it might be subscribers, it might be web traffic, it might be retweets, comments, downloads, it might be a number of other things. So again, if we're looking for metrics on how our EVP is doing and how our EVP is moving positively, those things, most of those things should be going up in the right direction. Just a warning though, I guess, an EVP isn't a product. It's not even a feeling, or maybe it's not even a promise. It's the sum of all the experiences that you have with an organization, and it's what differentiates you from the rest. The big truth, I guess, is that a career is the most sophisticated sell of them all, because if you're telling potential candidates, hey, you can do marvelous things in your role, you can do really exciting things in your role, you'll have a fantastic career here, we'll take you on a journey. It's at the point of joining an organization, that's almost fantasy, you know, because you can't predict that. You can't see that. You can't feel that. You don't know what it's going to look like in 10 years' time. So it's a really sophisticated sell. And you are selling the promise of a career. You're selling the promise of advancement. You're selling the promise of development within an organization. And it's a really sophisticated sell. So think hard about what that aspect of the EVP looks like. It's not just a throwaway line that you'll have a great career here. You might well do. But on the other hand, you might not. So think really hard about using something like that as a tagline within an EVP message. And just the last thing about what aligning it with the brand. You know, your EVP doesn't kind of sit alone. It sits within a suite of other things, if you like. So it's about the employee experience. It's about the EVP. It's about external opinion and how people view you. It's also about the corporate brand itself, and aligning all those to make sure they all sit together and nest together is really important, so that eventually, you know, the strategy, the mission, the values feeds into your culture, and your culture is made up of these different things. Really important to just understand how it all fits together and glues together. And hopefully what you generate is what's called brand advocates. So, you know, they're committed to the organization, they're committed to the corporate brand, they're committed to customers, and ultimately then your promise that you make through your EVP messaging to the outside world is real, because, you know, you've got these advocates internally within the organization who are driving all these different factors. So just pulling it together, there's a planning phase to this, where you're going to do research and understanding. There's then defining what our EVP is and the essence of working for the organization. What's the gaps? How do we close them? We implement it then through an EVP and employee brand process, and we communicate that out. And then we manage it, continuous management of the EVP and the brand promise, so that we're responding to what's happening in the marketplace. We're responding to changes in demands by different generations. So I guess my last slide really is if you've already got an EVP, or you've already got the basis of an EVP, have a look at it, continuous review and tweak it all the time. So make sure your profile personality, what you stand for, your purpose and values is up to date, how it feels and how it's changing and what that looks like. Make sure you've got a brand promise that differentiates you. That's really key. That's that recruitment and retention piece. It really plays to that. A refined message. What's your compelling core messages for each audience based on what they want, what they're looking for, and the sound employer brand attributes that you already have. And then your brand aspiration. Okay, it's not all about you know, what's happening now. It's also about your aspirational. So base it on what's achievable, but it's stretching. You know, there's no reason why you can't say, you know, we're aiming to be this. Or as an organization, this is what we want to be. Or as an organization, we're trying to achieve this and everybody gets X. So that's fine, as long as it's based in the truth of what you are as an organization. I appreciate I've gone through those really, really quick. I appreciate we're we're right on time. As we said, if there's any questions, please drop them into the chat, and we're certainly happy to send you the recording and resources in the next couple of days. Ellie, do you want to just wrap up?
Oh, yes, thank you very much, Ian. That really was quite a whistle-stop tour on employee value proposition. But fear not, everyone, we will get out the recording. You will get the slide decks. And I'm aware that Brian and Jenny did add a couple of questions in whilst you were going good there, Ian. So I'll bring those over to you and you can give me some answers, which we will send out in our follow-up email within the next couple of days. So there's nothing left to say other than that we hope you all have a great festive break and look forward to seeing you at one of our webinars in January 2024. Keep your eye out. Thank you very much for joining us.